All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to my home. Um, I'm going to talk today about my philosophy of leadership paper. Um, my original proposal to Dr. Boyd was about shared leadership models and egalitarian leadership structures. And he also suggested that I incorporate talking about leaderless movements in conjunction with that. And so I'll talk a little bit about the inspiration for this paper was when I participated in the Coalition of Immokalee Workers Fast for Fair Food back in March. The CIW is a group, the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, CIW, is a group of tomato pickers, mostly immigrants from Mexico, Guatemala, and Haiti, who have organized um, in really creative ways and with a really large core leadership group of close to 100 people at this point to really affect change in their working conditions, with improved wages and dignified treatment in the fields and all kinds of things. So after seeing a little bit and getting a little taste of how they operate, I kind of wanted to explore this idea more. And so I do this in the paper. The paper is sort of structured in a way where I talk about leadership, like a theoretical framework and key and core competencies of leaders. So I look at some of our texts from throughout the course, and starting with like Deep Change with Robert Quinn, and specifically what he calls a transformational paradigm of organizational life, which you can find on page 123 if you're interested, but which he outlines a number of things that are important. Also, Ryan Eisler's reading about uh, partnership models versus domination models of organizations, including her concept of what she calls hierarchies of actualization, talking about how the interaction among people within an organizational hierarchy where respect and accountability and power flows in all directions, as opposed to just kind of in one direction where all the people at the top get all the respect and have all the power. Um, and then finally, I also, or, in the theoretical framework, I talk about Margaret Wheatley's, um, dynamic relationships and how, and her understanding of quantum physics and how that relates to organizational dynamics around the potentials of when people come together and the critical connections that are necessary, and also the idea that processes are more important than like tasks in organizations. And then when I talk about competencies, I talk about using like Autry and servant leadership, and he talks a little bit about community building, like a springboard into talking about what community building is as a leadership competency. And I get into some outside sources from my trusty community development reader for all of you who are in Foundations of Community Development. I also use Singe's what's it called systems theory thinking as a leadership competency, and also finally um, emotional intelligence and as like sort of like a social skill set for leaders. Um, and after all that, I look at different organizations, including the CIW, who I already mentioned, and then also a group that a good friend of mine has been involved with over the last several years called the Yellow Bike Project in Austin, Texas. And that group is really interesting because they're an all volunteer organization. They have a like a collective leadership group of about 20 or 25 people, and they all, they make all their decisions by consensus. And so it's a really interesting model of decision making and shared leadership. And then the last group I look at, and this is mostly a Dr. Boyd suggestion, was the Occupy movement. Particularly, I'm looking at Occupy in New York City. And what's interesting is it's called a leaderless movement. Not only Dr. Boyd like used that term when we first started talking about this proposal, but also in a lot of the mainstream media. Um, but one of the most interesting things I found when I kind of started poking around is like in alternative media outlets, um, instead of a leaderless movement, they call it a leaderful movement. And I think that it's interesting to think about a lot of these groups in terms of being full of leaders who come together and act in ways that really expand their leadership capacities into the larger community and kind of beyond their own networks, but also within their own networks. And that was probably the most interesting thing I got talking with my friend Nathan about Yellow Bike in Austin and how it has really influenced other organizations, not only like startup organizations around the city, but also like some pretty well established organizations that interact and interface with like the city government there. So uh, my paper eventually concludes with a little. I'm probably going to incorporate some theological discussion. I was pretty interested in Peterson's in what we read by Peterson earlier this year, and Paul's writings about the body, the church is the body of Christ, and different parts and how they're all equally important. I might also talk a little bit about Peter in Acts 10 and 11 when he kind of goes through this major transformation. And then the final part of this paper is about how applicable it is to my life. And I actually have a couple of interesting opportunities where I'm going to try to be on part of some kind of leadership groups. One here in White Plains, in the city that I live in, trying to establish a chicken cooperative for at the community garden here. That I was sort of like in a cool way like invited by the mayor, who happened to be at our church attending an Earth Day tree planting ceremony, and so he's invited me to be part of that group. And then the other group that I'm hoping to be a part of is a group that's more of a regional capacity with the Presbyterian Church, whom my partner Sarah works for, and there's a pastor in the presbytery who's also a farmer, and he is starting this farm at this Presbyterian retreat center that's co-owned by like 3 different groups in the area. That's also a summer camp for kids, and so we're talking about like trying to put together like having it be like an educational training type of facility, but also it's going to be a community supported agriculture operation as well. So we'll be selling vegetables and things like that. So I'm hoping to be involved in that in a leadership capacity. And I want to bring the things I've talked about in my paper and what we've been reading about throughout the semester into my experiences in both of these potential groups that I'll be involved with. So that's kind of the short of it. I hope I didn't go too long in this, but it's a long paper. So thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing feedback that any feedback that anyone has to offer. All right, thanks. See you all later.